So, back in July, my feed started blowing up with images of a certain protagonist from a series I had no idea was even coming out. That just so happened to be Chisato from Lycoris Recoil, and honestly, at first, I wasn't really interested in it. It just seemed like something that was going to be some very girly action series that had bad animation, stupid story, and only relied on cuteness and fluff to get you through to the end of the series. Normally, when you get an anime that focuses primarily on gunfights, you get something that has really bad animation, your characters are static, holding down the trigger on a fully automatic weapon, and it looks like crap. Cringe! At least, that's been my experience with guns in anime, anyway. There was also the issue of seeing an overwhelmingly female cast in the series, and that made me feel like this could just be some really girly, sort of bad animated action series like Girls Frontline or some shit like that. And that's not to say that having a largely female cast is a bad thing. I mean, shows like Claymore and ReZero exist, and I actually really like ReZero. It's one of my favorites. So when I went into this, mostly out of spite because I just had to see why people were blowing up my feed with memes and pictures of Chisato being best girl, I expected this to be something that was just entirely a gag show that I would laugh at for being bad. Especially after I found out it was being produced by A1 Studios, who produced my least favorite anime of all time, Fairy Tail. So going into this, my expectations were that the series was going to consist of some poorly animated gunfights, along with a non-existent story that relied on, like, friendship and love and happiness the whole time. Again, not that those things are necessarily bad. Those themes occur in a lot of series. Like the whole friendship thing is one of the central points of Naruto, and that's another one of my favorite animes. Well, if you've seen the series, you'll know I was kind of wrong about that. Honestly, what Lycoris Recoil turned out to be was far better than what I'd expected going into it. Now, the series still does have the issue of characters with machine guns just sitting there and statically spraying bullets in a straight line, but every major gunfight has some sort of beautiful visual appeal to it that makes it really just fantastic. And I can be a real snob about animation sometimes. Like, if something's even just slightly off, it will piss me off. And there certainly are moments where the animation hurt my soul. There's this point in episode 2 where the car does this ridiculous flip that defies physics. But that's beside the point. You get to major action sequences and the fistfights, the gunfights, all of the choreography, the animation, it all comes together really well, and it makes this sort of smooth and seamless fight that is very visually appealing to me. Another huge point going for Lycoris Recoil is that it's not just some cutesy all-girls series. I mean, they actually took time to write a good story for this series. You get to watch Chisato struggle with her own moral conundrums. You get to watch Takina develop emotionally, from the stone-cold emotionless killer she is at the beginning of the series, to someone who actually can take a joke and have some fun at the very end. And don't even get me started on the series' antagonist, Majima. The guy is just a fantastic villain. And while the story isn't the greatest thing in the world, it is still far better than what I had expected going into the series. Now, I will give it this fair caveat. I like long and deep series. Now, Lycoris Recoil certainly does have that deep aspect with the Allen Institute and with DA, but it's still only 13 episodes long, and there's only so much story you can fit into those 13 episodes. I feel like 13 episodes is the right length, though. The pacing is correct, and there's enough information there that is only touched on as it is needed to be. Which is fine. They have enough material already to do future seasons. And the story is contained enough to where if they don't get a season 2, or any other future seasons for that matter, it ends on a good note. Everything feels complete. You don't feel like you've been left on a cliffhanger after 30 episodes. Overall, this series might not rank as one of my all-time favorite animes, but it definitely hits high on the list for this year's anime. I think you'll find you'll actually really like this series. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. That's just my personal opinion on it. There are some things that I do have major complaints with about the series, but that's for the spoiler-heavy section that comes after this. To conclude this, A1 really blew me away with this, and I was not expecting that. And now it's time to get into the nitty-gritty details of the series and really pick at the things I like and don't like. This section is going to contain spoilers, so if you don't want the series spoiled for you, you should probably stop watching right now.
There is no meme. This is just a threat.
So I guess we could start with the main characters then, and there's really nothing I have a problem with on that front. The dynamic between the stone-cold Takina and the very bubbly and giddy Chisato works very well. Because on one hand, you have Chisato keeping the series from drowning in its own drama, and on the other hand, you have Takina grounding the show in reality and challenging Chisato's idealism. And it's not like these characters get away with everything they do either. I mean, Chisato has a code of not killing people. Mind you, she's supposed to be an assassin fighting terrorists. But having been saved from a lethal heart disease by someone transplanting an artificial heart into her, she feels like she doesn't have the right to kill people. And now that becomes a problem as she ends up fighting the ruthless Majima multiple times over the series. And the guy does not go down easy. On top of that, there are also other characters who push her into a corner and try to get her to kill. It's not a plot point that goes unaddressed, which is nice. You really get to see her struggle with the practicality of not killing in a profession where you are fighting killers. And when she's finally backed so far into a corner that she has to kill to save her friend Takina, she does it reluctantly. Of course, Chisato has other struggles as well. The artificial heart that's keeping her alive won't last until she's 18. On top of that, at the midpoint of the series, someone sabotages the heart, reducing her lifespan to about 2 more months. She was already aware that she was dying early, but an even earlier death shakes her only a little bit, and she seems to just accept the fact that she's going to die. And Takino's emotional development does not come off as far too rapid. She still maintains elements of that stone-cold practicality that she started with, but closer to the end of the series, you start to see her smile a little bit more and care more about the people around her and act a little more human. And when she finds out that the guy who's been manipulating everything from behind the scenes has had the artificial heart that Chisato needs to live implanted in his chest, hoping to force Chisato to kill him, she offers to do the job for her friend. Hell, she actually almost pulls it off if it weren't for the fact that Chisato stopped her. So yeah, this series succeeds in creating 2 main characters who aren't just monotone and boring the whole time. And I can actually understand why the internet was briefly obsessed with Chisato Nishikigi. Now, if only I could figure out why everyone's so fanatical about Spy Family. But let's move on for a bit and talk about the big bad evil guy of the series, who effectively boils down to green-haired Matt Murdock with a gun. Majima is a villain through and through, but he operates on the same sort of twisted logic that you would find in the likes of Thanos. He makes his role to back the weaker side of a conflict regardless of morals, which in this case puts him on the side of a bunch of terrorists attacking Japan. He's ruthless and cunning, and proves to be the most dangerous person to enter the country in a very long time. As in, since the last time he entered the country. He's quick to exploit the weaknesses of others, like when he blinds Chisato in a fight after realizing that she has some sort of super perceptive eyes, and when he uses her own non-lethal code against her. Of course, Majima has his own agenda as well. The reason he's doing all this is because he wants to expose the truth of corrupt governing bodies across the world, and that extends to the Allen Institute, known for their mysterious philanthropy to everyone of the world. But for being a ruthless evil person, there are some scenes that just really add some more dynamic to his character. Like when he breaks into Chisato's safe house, only just to have a brief conversation with her and learn a few things about why she's doing what she's doing. He even goes so far as to point out the similarities between the two of them. His end goal was ultimately to recruit her for her superhuman abilities to his cause of exposing the Allen Institute as a group that wants to raise superpowered assassins. And from a writing standpoint, Majima is just excellent. He acts as an antithesis to Chisato. They're both superhuman, they're both trained killers, and they both believe what they're doing is right. The important difference being that Chisato does not want to kill, and Majima is perfectly willing to kill whoever stands in his way. On top of that, having Majima around actually makes the stakes for the series believable. His presence in the series proves that he's a match for Chisato and for DA's overwhelmingly powerful surveillance network. Hell, he even uses DA's attempts to snuff him out before he can deal damage to deal even more damage to them. And the fact that he proves to be an equal match for Chisato makes it seem like this fight could go either way. I mean, Obviously, you know that the hero's going to win in the end. That's just how these things go. But as it stands, it feels like there's actually something on the line whenever those two meet. That's why I say Majima is a perfect villain for this series. But I guess I have to move on to my overall critiques of the series now. And there are a few points in the writing that I really just did not like. And there are a few animation bits that I think are just not great. I've already touched on the animation a bit. You have problems with characters just sitting there spraying bullets, and it feels like nothing's moving in that scene. And there are also issues with, CGI cars defying physics. But that's my only critique on the visual front. The fact that they don't rely on fan service is really good for them. My two major critiques of the series are entirely to do with certain sections of the story and the way they were written. And I should address them in order. The first being the issue of DA itself. DA is this covert anti-terrorist organization that takes orphan children and turns them into soldiers.
Are you serious?
The series seems to want you to disregard the morality of using children to fight terrorists. You can figure that much out by the fact that it's almost never questioned. The only time the morality of DA is questioned is once at the very beginning of the series, and it's only done in a passing comment, making it more like a joke than any sort of serious moral critique of a government body that secretly abducts and trains orphans to fight terrorists. They even go so far as to brainwash these kids into worshipping them like some all-powerful parents. There's also the issue of DA never being depicted as doing anything criminally wrong. Sure, they might have stabbed Takina in the back over a morally correct decision to save a comrade, but they are only ever depicted fighting violent terrorists with an urge to kill. It really just feels like the series wants you to think that this Japanese version of child Treadstone is moral. And that's just a critique of one of the undertones of the series. Now I'm actually going to talk about something that was written into the series directly. So let's frame this for a bit. Majima has DA backed into a corner. He has control of their supercomputer, Radiata, and he is using it to lock them out of all systems and broadcast his declaration of war to the nation. He's effectively won at this point. He's exposed Lycoris as a group of child assassins stationed around the nation in order to contain crime and make people believe their nation is safer than it actually is. Unfortunately for him, there's a third-party hacker that blocks him out of Radiata and resets everything. Then, they use their skills to fabricate a fake newscast to make it look like everything Majima had just said and done was all part of a theatrical performance to announce a new local attraction event. And people believe it without any sort of doubt whatsoever.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
It felt like such a slap in the face, right at the climax of the series, that I just couldn't focus on it for a little while. People really just watched a teenage girl pull a gun out of her handbag and shoot a random guy in the streets. They've also seen newscasts of people fighting in the observatory deck of a radio tower. But the entire population just magically chooses to believe that it was all just staged for some sort of attraction at the new opening of this radio tower. The plot runs so smoothly up to that point, it felt like I ran into a brick wall. But the writers needed to back DA out of that corner somehow because they need DA to be the good guy in this series. I mean, God forbid you have a terrorist expose the morally questionable practices of your government. But other than those two major points, I don't really see any other problems. And even then, only one really presents a huge problem. The issue of subtones and the series not questioning the morals of DA is kind of moot if you think about it. They don't really have to address it. It's just one of those things that where if we're being realistic, anyone would question the moral of a government using children to fight terrorists. Could you imagine the backlash in the States if the CIA or the FBI was found doing this exact same thing? Ultimately, the series ends on a high note where they can either take it into a season 2 or they can leave it as is if they need to. We get our happy ending and Chisato decides she's not going to be a member of the Allen children anymore and pitches the necklace she got off into the ocean. I'm personally hoping they take this into a season 2 because they still have the Allen Institute out there and Majima is still very much alive. So like I said, it's a great series. I give it an 8 out of 10. It has excellent visual appeal, it has great story, and a lot of the characters are very memorable, even though some of them still do exist just to push the plot. And like I said earlier, if you can stomach some of the goofy stuff that happens over the course of the series, you'll find yourself enjoying a great series with great action and great characters. Of course, this is all just my opinion. I don't mean to be all high and mighty. If you didn't like it, or if you thought it was better, or my critiques are wrong, feel free to tell me why. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, consider subscribing, and maybe sharing this to some people. Catch you next time when I go off on another rant about some anime. See ya.